Yes, so this is a report on Blaze Media, and this was authored by Steve Baker and Joe Hanneman, two reporters who have covered January 6th. And this was teased last week, to your point, by Glenn Beck and Steve Baker, that this was going to be the greatest political scandal of all time, that this would implicate high-level Trump administration officials, including perhaps CIA Director John Ratcliffe, DNI Director Tulsi Gabbard, and others, related to who these reporters believe they have identified as the individual seen on that very grainy, low quality surveillance video of a hoodie suspect walking around Capitol Hill on January 5th, that evening, which is the time frame that the FBI and law enforcement believe those two dummy explosive pipe bombs were planted outside the headquarters of the RNC and the DNC, only to be conveniently and coincidentally discovered 17 hours later to coincide with the start of the joint session of Congress. So apparently what happened is Steve Baker was looking at video from January 6th, Capitol police officers who were using what they call non-lethal munitions on the crowd. You and I have talked about that. And he apparently saw a Capitol police officer who he thought had the same gait pattern as this individual on January 5th, who still has not been identified, January 5th, 2021.
Is
So
there
apparently
something
they
unique
made
enough? Is there something unique enough about the suspect? Because this is like the Magruder film, kinda. You and Beatty and Pasovic and Glenn Beck's team and many others, for hours and hours and hours, have gone over all this grainy footage. I mean, Beatty was on the show one time. You talk about Glenn and his team. I mean, Beatty was on the show one time for an hour, and I think we went over this thing, and he had like every movement of this. And I didn't have a suspect at the time, but why this is so important, why the official narrative was a lie, and how this was going to be something that would explode the whole Fedsurrection, ma'am.
Right. Well, as Darren Beatty has said, and I think Darren Beatty and I have uncovered the most information, evidence, shady circumstances related to the pipe bombers, both at the DNC and RNC. But what Darren always said is if you expose the truth about the pipe bombs, the entire January 6th narrative unravels, because that was the incident, that those two incidents really initiated the panic that day.
And I think that's what Glenn's talking about. If you solve the identity of this pipe bomber, or you can get the idea that the feds knew a lot more about this pipe bomber, even maybe being part of them or knowing about it, this gets to be Watergate level, because then the entire official narrative collapses, correct?
Correct.
To all units, proceed to your post assignments. All units, proceed to your post assignments.
Yeah, baby, it's episode 6 of Probable Cause on November 11, 2025, also known as Veterans Day. One of us is a military veteran. Let's let the audience guess before we reveal it. But in any case, happy Veterans Day to everybody. Our special guest tonight is Kyle Seraphin, a former FBI agent, or as he puts it, a recovering FBI agent. He's also the host of a very popular podcast called The Kyle Seraphin Show. And he is in the middle. I hate to use cliches like the internet is blowing up, a hugely viral story, but I don't know how else to put it. He's in the middle of exactly that right now. He's also facing a lawsuit, which must be stressful, and it's Veterans Day. So you put all that together, and I think, Greg, we should really thank Kyle for spending a little quality time with us, don't you think?
Good seeing you again, Kyle.
Yeah, it's good to see both you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Jeff, does the Civil War count towards Veterans Day? Because then I can participate in this. But other than that,
absolutely. What branch of the service were you in?
It was the Grays and the Blues back then, I think. So,
Kyle, you're Air Force?
Yes, sir. That's right.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your cervix. Terrible joke.
Terrible.
All right. So
Hey, Jeff, before we go too far, did Bannon refer to that video as the Magruder video?
yes, he did.
Okay,
I
I
always
just
thought it
wanted
was the Zapruder film, but there's another little-known film called the Magruder film.
Yeah, it
That's
was
the real
actually
one.
featured in the alternate universe known as MacGruber, which was a takeoff from MacGyver.
Thank
it's a
you.
spoof film.
That's what I think he was sort of blending it with, but
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, I think Bannon's pretty damn good, but everybody makes mistakes. So.
No. I just want to make sure I didn't mishear. But
No, you didn't. You did not mishear. All right, so let's get to the pipe bomb story. And Kyle, Greg, thank you for turning me on to Kyle. There's so much out there that I'm a guy who's like pretty plugged into various podcasts and the sort of subjects that we deal with, but I hadn't really been familiar with Kyle until now. I listened to the last 2 episodes, and I really have to wonder who your audience is, because Kyle, you talk a mile a minute, full of information at a very high level. I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. I'm really interested in who your audience is, because I don't think the average person has even heard of the pipe bomb story. So can I just try to explain it in my half-assed way, and then
let me tell you who the audience is, though, because it's a bifurcated audience.
Right.
Some of my audience fit into the category like over 45, news interested, highly interested in what goes on in the FBI, and they watch me at like 3/4 speed to be able to really go figure out what's going on. So I'm told that people watch me slower than normal, which is not normal. And then some of my audience is hyper caffeinated, and I don't know what they do for a living, but they watch me at like 1.4 to 1.6x. And I find those people fascinating because they let me know that they're watching me at high speed. But yes, I speak very, very quickly. And I'm going to do my best to slow it down a little bit, because I had some constructive criticism the other day. They said, Kyle, maybe take the foot off the gas a little bit and let people absorb the information. You're sending it pretty quick.
Right.
But that is,
well, I
that
didn't
is
mean
how
it as
I know,
didn't
it's
mean it
how I
as
send
criticism.
it.
It really just depends who the audience is, All right, so let me try to explain it in a half-assed way. I've been following, but not closely, the pipe bomb story for a while, mostly by watching Darren Beatty, or Beatty, I don't know how it's pronounced, when he was on Bannon show, and also reading Revolver News. And I found it pretty hard to follow. But before we get into the specifics about what people are arguing about, I think basically 2 pipe bombs, which apparently aren't real, were found on either the day of January 6th. I don't know when it was found, but I guess they were left there the day before.
Yeah, they were found before 1 o'clock on the day of.
Okay. And apparently they weren't real, in the sense that they weren't going to go off. And people have different. I'm already wrong. I'm telling. Let me just tell you my
Not
understanding.
necessarily wrong, but this was something I wanted to specifically ask Kyle, because I have not been able to come to a conclusion about the viability of the devices, and I was hoping you would have better insight as to that.
All right. Now, Kyle, before you go wild, Kyle, I preface this by saying it's just my half-assed understanding. So I thought that most people who are aware of this are saying, well, they weren't going to go off, but there's not a clear explanation as to why. But it has something to do with framing Trump supporters in terms of it being part of the insurrection. This is the last chance to make Trump unelectable, get rid of him. And they were going to make it seem like his supporters or somebody allied with Trump was responsible for it. Anyway, they didn't go off for whatever reason. Maybe the plan got called off. Maybe it was like a plan B in case things didn't go wild, weren't wild enough at the Capitol. And that's pretty much the basics. How much did I screw up?
I think you were most of the way there. The controversy that has come up about the viability of the devices, and the controversy runs from anybody who's ever dealt with an explosive device, been in the EOD tech program, the Special Agent Bomb Tech program the FBI has, the Render Safe mission, the Counter IED mission, which exists across the country, both in federal and local. That's been a big problem because people looked at it and went, no way, man. They had 1 hour timers on them. So how does a 1 hour timer bomb setting not go off? They've been there for 17 hours. The other problem is that the special agent, or actually the assistant director in charge of the Washington field office at that time, Steve D'Antuono, gave sworn testimony to Tom Massey in 2023, and he stated definitively that the FBI laboratory division declared them viable and said that they were viable devices, which contradicts what I was told a couple of days after January 6th when we did a surveillance on a supposed person of interest in this case, and we were briefed that they were not viable, that they were inert, and the way I recall it was looked very bomb-like. Or as my friend Steve Friend, another, I guess, foreign and now current, again, FBI agents like to say, they would have been bombs if they had been bombs, but they were not.
They look like microphones. As a podcaster, maybe that's microphones are in my mind. They look like microphones to me with dials on them.
Allow me to read something from the actual, it's not classified, it never was, but it was obviously part of the investigation, and it was actually released a couple of weeks ago. So this is, I would say, probably closer to the most definitive answer you'll get on what they were, and let the audience make their mind up. This is a not for external dissemination, and then was disseminated by the House Intel Committee or whatever the committee was. And it says device 1, which is exactly what you guys were looking at. There were 2 devices. This is one of them. Powder from device 1, item 2, contained an oxidized potassium nitrate, a fuel sulfur, and a fuel mix consistent with charcoal. The powder was tested for thermal susceptibility, aka a flame test, with negative results. Which to me means they took the black powder and tried to ignite it, and it didn't ignite. It says, however, in the proper proportions, these chemicals can form the low explosive black powder. The way that I took away from this is these had enough of the actual components that would be consistent with a black powder, and that they would set off a dog if you were doing some sort of training work, so that they would know that this is a black powder device. But the flame test was that they were not in the proper proportions to actually make it ignite. And then it says, for more detailed information, you can go to the FBI laboratory report, which is dated January the 12th, 2021, report number redacted. When properly ignited by a suitable source of heat, low explosives such as this are designed to deflagrate and to generate gases when properly confined in a container, such as a can, bottle, or pipe. The gases generate pressure on the canister or container wall and cause an explosion of the container. Everything about that tells me that nothing in this report used the word viability or viable or legitimate or explosive or operational. And I've done the search for the document. So I'll just give you guys that information. And then you can believe Steve D'Antuono underneath his sworn testimony. You can believe what I was told on January the 13th of 2021 out in the field when I asked, hey, how close can we get to this guy? Are they going to blow us up? Are these viable devices? Are these functional explosives? And this was an officer safety question I had as a special operations, group guy, or also known as SOG or FISR. So we're doing physical surveillance, watching a person of interest in this case. And they said, no, they weren't going to blow up. So we could.
All right. So you saw, or somebody, so you became aware that they were there while you were on surveillance. And hold off on a minute about why you were on surveillance. But let me just clarify that. You became aware of these pipe bombs while you were there?
No, we were tasked with watching someone on the case that was looking for this pipe bomber.
Oh, but I thought you said you were briefed that you don't need to worry about them.
Correct. So so the way that this works for people's understanding on the outside, the way that surveillance units work for the FBI specifically is that we are not assigned cases. We work as a sort of augmentation for case agents. So we're an outside resource in the same way you might call up the SWAT team and have them deliver your warrant because it's a high, risk situation. We would be the specific and specialized surveillance unit that would go out there and sit in our cars all day and pee in a bottle, talk on the radio and look through the binoculars and take the pictures. And so we would get a case briefing. And in this case, the case briefing took place in the field. They sent us a package like they normally would, and pictures and license plate numbers, and here's the address and location. But we were actually met by someone from the JTTF, as I recall, who sat down and said, okay, gentlemen, here's the deal. Here's who we're working with. Ask your questions. This is the kind of the framework of this case, which was pretty fluid at the time. It was a week after January 6th. And one of the questions I specifically asked was, what is our safety posture and how far do we need to stand off from this person? Are we dealing with a legitimate bomb that may actually come after us? And they went, no, inert devices. So we don't think you have to have that precautionary worry. And so that's why I got any information about this at all, because I asked.
Kyle, just for the audience, JTTF is the
Joint Terrorism Task Force. So this is the federal /state/local task force interoperability unit. The FBI runs them out of every field office, and the goal is to put local cops and state cops and so on in a place where they can all share information and they can all work with their various different specialties and capabilities. A local cop can do a street stop that an FBI agent cannot. And so you bring different sort of tools to bear on the problem of terrorism. It's a post 9/11 phenomenon that the FBI kind of created, and it's actually a big problem in some ways, but it is what was going on for this particular situation.
Thank you. And Jeff, just so you know, SOG, they're specialized in the fact that they're nondescript. They blend in, they're not the traditional, conservative suit and short haircut FBI agent, but more like you see Kyle there, and, they'll employ a variety of vehicles that will blend in with the setting type thing.
Okay. And I apologize if you already answered this, but I'm still not quite getting something. I think what you said was you were told that you were looking out for explosives, and that's what prompted you to ask.
No.
So we were looking for the person that had planted these exact pipe bombs. So the FBI generated a case very early on, just after January 6th. Obviously, they found explosives on the day of, as you mentioned. And then the FBI began an investigation to find out who left these bombs, who was the person that was
okay. So it was after that. All right, I got it.
So that federal investigation resulted in the identification of a couple of persons of interest. They weren't the level of saying this is the subject of the investigation, but they were interested parties. They had some connection, they thought. And so we were going to go try to suss that out on their behalf. And one of the things we did was look into a person that, as I've read the reports, and there's a couple of them I can refer you guys to, but they were referred to as person of interest 3. And this was a civilian Air Force contractor living in Falls Church, Virginia. This is all listed over here at this point. This is out open source. The House put this out at January of this year. And so we were sitting to watch, and what we do is called pattern of life. So we find out when you wake up by getting there at 3 a.m. We watch when the lights click on and when your coffee pot starts, we see when you go to work and if you go to work and where you go to work and how often you go to the same work, or if you go to a different construction site every day, or if you go to a different office and so on. So pattern of life is kind of the standard thing we would do. And that allows the case agents to kind of figure out, hey, is this person who we're looking at? We kind of contain you at the same time because we're watching you and we know where you are. And if they want to go and do what's called a bump, which means they may just bump into you in a location where they know you're going to be and we're watching so we can tell them where it is, then they can have a casual conversation and try to elicit information. That's one tactic. They could also do what's called a knock and talk, but rather than have agents come out where nobody's home, this surveillance team's watching the door. We know who's home and who's not home and when they got there. So when they want to go knock on the door, we have kind of containment after that. And by the way, after the agents go leave, having that little knock and talk and question at the door, maybe you tell them to go pee off and leave. Well, then we can see what you do next. And so we might see that you run to your partner in crime. And, depending on the case, there's all kinds of things you can do with surveillance. And so that's what we were doing on that day. We were containment. We were watch and report, if you will, and generating what is this guy about and who is he and who does he know and who comes to his house and, does he leave the house at all and what does he drive and how so?
Okay.
And is he a fast driver?
So it was after the devices had been found, right?
Yeah, this was on January the 13th and 14th of 2021.
Okay. All right. So I remember from watching Darren Beatty and from reading the Revolver stories, I remember only vaguely, but part of what was arousing suspicions was how the Secret Service or whomever didn't really see what was there, and it was kind of weird because it was kind of in an open area, and everybody had a very relaxed posture. The way they were walking around, there were even school children, I think, going by. Can you say a little bit about that part of it?
Yeah, some of the things that were sort of incongruous with reaction to finding an explosive device is what you're pointing out here. The first thing is that area had already previously been swept by the Secret Service and their bomb dogs and technicians because the vice president was going to go over. This is specifically at the DNC. So the argument is that these are top tier professionals. They're very good at what they do. And the odds of them missing a bomb that, as you showed, was like sitting in plain sight underneath a bush next to a bench, that's so visible that even like somebody from the street can see it 20 feet away. You're not going to have a bomb dog miss these things. The other one was actually tucked behind a dumpster. The thing on the right-hand side is actually a rat trap, I believe, classic DC sort of ornament. And so that was actually kind of tucked away and looked like it might be trash. The thing that's wild, and yeah, you're talking about the sort of the posture of the law enforcement when they found it. Steve Baker is the one who's released the most recent report, and he's the one I follow more than Darren and more than Julie, mostly because he spent more hours in the CCTV footage room than anybody else that I'm aware of. And I think I think he holds the record on the planet right now looking at this particular event. What he noticed was that these police officers were told that there was an explosive device underneath the park bench, and they finished their sandwich for a couple of minutes. And then they did not set up what would normally be the case, which would be a safety cordon. You'd set a minimum safe distance, and anybody who's worked with explosives knows how this works. You would have to set it up. So the question was, did a dog miss the bomb? As you guys are posting up on the screen, great question. The answer is unlikely. And the belief that the guys have that have been doing this work is that likely the bomb actually was moved and then replaced at some point in time. But interestingly enough, the DNC video footage, which is the only one that would show it, and it doesn't belong to Congress, so they can't require it. The DNC is a private entity. They haven't ever released that. They, being the FBI in this case, have never showed the public 17 hours of footage from the time it was allegedly placed and the time that it was discovered. And that window would be very telling. We could see the bomb sweeps, and if they missed it, which would be crazy, if it was picked up and then replaced. One of the things that's really wild is the original video showing the placement, which the FBI has put out, has it. Show me the orientation of the bombs if you would again, if you'll throw them back on the screen. And we're going to be looking at the one that's on the left-hand side. So what you see is the dial is up and away from the pavement. However, the placement in the original video that is shown shows the dial closer to the bricks and not further from the bricks, which means it was likely either replaced or it was actually taken away and put back there for some reason. All of it is really suspicious and sketchy, and it all leads towards questions that people have had about law enforcement from the beginning. Why did they not react the way you would? Why was it missed by the bomb dogs? And then why on earth did they find these things that were inoperable and nobody seemed to react like we just found a bomb near where the vice president's going to be, all of which should be, kind of a high gravity event, one would think. Yeah. And nobody behaved in a way that made them seem like they were bombs. And in fact, these look very much like what the FBI uses for their training devices, just for anybody who's ever been around the bomb program. This is exactly what they look like. They're like classic. If you were going to describe what a pipe bomb is, they have a timer, they got a battery to initiate, they've got some wiring, and then you've got a canister and you've got some caps and on a galvanized pipe. Yeah. It's very, and a little bit of powder inside that is an energetic material. So
is it possible it was a training event that went sideways and that's the explanation or no?
You want to go, Greg?
Well, I just want to back up a second. You had cited the report on one of the devices. Mm-hmm. Were both devices identical as far as the composition and ratio of the powder, so that neither one was actually viable? Is that it?
Yeah, that's my understanding. I only saved one of them on here because I think it was the only one. It was representative, but they're the same. Yeah, they basically ran the same.
Okay, I was just wondering if there was a reason you distinguish between one and the other. That's
no,
all.
and I'm happy to send you guys these for future, just for your kind of. They've got a neat little thing. Somebody chastised me on social media, and they were like, "You shouldn't post that; it's dangerous." I'm like, the FBI posted it. Like, I'm fine. If you haven't figured out how a pipe bomb works, it's not exactly. It's not even close to like model rocket science, which I used to do as a teenager. So it's just not very difficult stuff to be able to put together, and it's everywhere. But yeah, these devices are very questionable in their orientation, in the composition, and then also in their discovery process. Very strange, and even their placement is a question. Now, I don't think anybody else has done the amount of work that the guys at the Blaze have done. They have a man named Armitage who people can find on X.
Yeah, I was reading some of that about him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he's highly capable, like a dog with a bone, has just been, sort of fixated on this thing in a
video analyst kind of a guy. Is that
what like weaponized autism is the way I kind of think of these kind of things. Like people that are kind of on that spectrum, but they just really are fixated on, and in a good way. I mean, we use them in the intel community a regular time. Our best analysts tend to be people that are very fixated on a thing that they have a special talent towards. And this, for whatever reason, kind of scratched the itch that he had of questions. Mm-hmm. What happened on this day? So he's actually tracked the placement of the bombs. And as a best I can regurgitate it to you, again, this wasn't my story, but I've followed it well enough. It sounds like there was a location A where they were deposited. There are two bombs, two devices, and they were both moved to secondary locations.
Correct. Now, wasn't one like the Black Movement Coalition or something?
Yeah, the Congressional Black Caucus.
Okay.
And so the first one was actually set there and then later moved, and pieces of that bomb were left. Maybe an alligator clip was speculated, but something from the device actually didn't make it to location B, and so all of this looks like somebody ran an op of some kind and failed at that op and went to secondary locations, whether they were discovered or they thought it was too obvious, or it looks good in the daylight, but in the darkness, there's a street light over it and it looks like everybody, whatever reason, it appears that they were moved, and they were moved deliberately and intentionally by the person who originally placed them. That's all bizarre. None of that's super professional, as you can imagine. If you wanted to see what it looked like at night, you should just do a recon at night. That's what people do. So the question of training exercise was brought up, and it was something that people have speculated on for a long time. Would they try to cover it this way? The problem is the FBI's had 5 years to determine whether or not there was a government training exercise. I spoke yesterday with Chief Sund, who was the Capitol Chief Police on the day of, and has since left. And he said, whenever there's an exercise, whatever it may be, doesn't matter what agency is involved, there's a big blast and everybody has to know that it's going on, because otherwise you end up with a freaking pipe bomb in front of like where the DNC is and the vice president walks by. That's kind of a big deal if you screw that up. So
even under the worst circumstances, I am sure within 48 hours, if this was a legitimate training exercise, they would have fessed up and said, our bad.
Exactly.
This was a huge.
It's not the sort of thing they would need to cover up this intensely, and
nor would you need to place them. You wouldn't need to place them overnight for a training exercise. You could drop them in the morning and then you send the teams in, because it doesn't matter when you place something for a training exercise, because you don't have to approximate all of the reality. What you need to do is you need to like test your bombs, test your sweepers, decide whether or not people react appropriately, and then the value in the training exercise is getting a good rep in, identifying a danger, and then setting up the proper response in the way that you're supposed to. And by the way, they wouldn't have done it on January 6th, which was—
I was going to say, Kyle, that's the came to mind immediately. Like maybe a month ahead of time or 2 weeks ahead of time even, but not on the eve of, knowing that the following day is when you need all your personnel and manpower focused on the mission and not distracted by a training exercise.
That's right. And at the end of the day, the FBI offered a $500,000 reward.
Well,
for 5 years, not for a training exercise.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I wrote an article almost on the anniversary, the 1 year anniversary of this. It was I think January 23 the following year. And what caught my attention amongst all the other things that we sort of addressed is the initial reward. And I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember what the initial reward was after this happened?
I don't. Remind me.
It was $50,000.
That sounds right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But right off the bat, I'm thinking this thing had national import and would have been considered a major case. And $50,000 is what you offer for a bank robber.
That's right.
Or maybe a, top fugitive. But I mean, nothing like this. And then, it eventually moved up to $75,000.
That's right. Yeah, they did a couple of increments.
Pittance when you consider the impact and the significance of this type of a case. When has the FBI ever been frugal when it comes to reward money?
I want you to keep that in mind, because we're going to talk about something, and I'm going to lean on your FBI experience to weigh in as well. But the FBI is not frugal with resources. That's an easy way to say it, and it's very true.
2 years later,
I heard you on your show today talking about how much money they spend on stakeouts, like
but 2 years later, Kyle,
a day.
And a day, yeah.
2 years later, it had gone up to $100,000, and I'm thinking, $100,000 for an investigation of this scope and scale?
Right. Let's get perspective for people to go back, 5 years ago, which is not always easy to do. But we're talking about the single most terroristic thing that happened on January the 6th. There is no denying that leaving a weapon that is potentially of mass destruction and is completely indiscriminate. This is not a discrete weapon system where someone fires a weapon and they hit a person that they aim at or accidentally. We're talking about something that you're going to set a timer, walk away from, and then a bus full of nuns or a bunch of children are coming across holding hands. Like
the vice president of the United
States. Like anybody could be there in an hour, and you have no ability to go out there and interrupt that thing. This is not even command detonated where it's by like remote by phone, or whether you're talking about a pressure plate like you would do overseas where they'd set up something that's run out where you hit a certain spot and then we get the person in that area. It is completely indiscriminate to put a timer system on there. And that is very, the question of terrorism always comes to ideology as well. So we don't know what the ideology of the bomber would be, but I'm just saying like terroristic in nature and certainly like mass danger. That you're going to go do this. And so that's a big deal. And here's the other crazy thing that made me realize what this was a kind of a cover up. And it's been my contention that this was illogical investigative steps since the beginning. But how did everybody know that there was not going to be more pipe bombs dropped?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how did they know? How did everybody know that that was the end of it? It was 2 pipe bombs. This was the day, and then there are no more. That's craziness to me, because nobody assumes that someone drops a pipe bomb, gets away with it, and then thinks, well, that was it. I retired 2-0.
And that used to be drubbed into us at the police academy. If you do a search and you find a gun,
there's always
that doesn't mean there's not a second gun. If you find a second gun, that does not mean there's not a third gun, and so on until you've exhausted, the search.
So I got a great text message from one of my buddies out in California once as kind of a additional story to that one. And he said, Kyle, just remember, if you search somebody and find a gun, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have a grenade. And they found an active grenade in a gangbanger's crotch region. And then they pulled it out and they set it, and everybody did a, maximum safe distance. They went and ran out there. They got 75 yards and they went, why does that guy have a frag grenade in his pants? And he was like, I just do.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just a reiteration. Yeah. You find one thing, you assume that there's more.
Of course. Yeah. And just to get back, I don't want to get stuck on it, but with the reward, when I was doing my research for the blog post, I discovered that there was a Russian international computer crime figure that the FBI was offering a reward of, and guess the amount, Jeff, just out of curiosity. If we're up to $500,000 right now for the January 5th bombing suspect. What do you think the reward is for a cyber criminal from Russia?
You mean right now?
Right now. Or unless it's been caught, but yes.
I'll do what Paul Schaefer used to do on the David Letterman show. $6 billion.
Well, it was $3 million.
I could have told you that.
The joke is to take the air out of your.
Yeah. No, I get you. I know you're doing, but I'm just saying $3 million for a nonviolent criminal
that they're never going to catch either. Let's be real. They're never going to catch that guy.
So the reward was 3% of what they were.
Point taken. Taken.
Yeah, no,
hey, somebody from the audience is asking a question. Okay. Why is it that only Revolver News was on this story? And as I said earlier, also Steve Bannon. And hopefully now the tide seems to be turning. But any thoughts on why for so long this story was mostly ignored?
Sure. So the mainstream media basically went away from it because it wasn't the sexy convictions that they were looking for that fit the ideology that January 6th was this thing of MAGA extremists that were doing dangerous stuff. It's an unanswered question. What the hell happened? And everybody who looks at it kind of goes, it seems like there might have been some agencies involved in this that was pretty bizarre. And maybe we could get some further questions. Revolver's been very good about it. Julie Kelly has covered it because she covers all things January 6th in general, and she takes credit for it. Steve Baker and the Blaze have also been there. Now, Steve Baker didn't work for the Blaze for the entire time since January 6th. He was an independent journalist and did stuff over on a Substack and his own blog. So people didn't necessarily see it as big. But the moment that he got hired on by by Glenn Beck and the Blaze, that's when his profile work continued on. But he's been working on it for 5 years as well. But for whatever reason, the mainstream has been roughly uninterested. And I think it didn't fit their sensibilities of what that day was because it's an outlier. It wasn't really, it's kind of an anomaly. And nobody else brought a pre-planned weapon of mass destruction. Nobody else even brought weapons that they really use outside of one guy fired a gun up like a revolver at one point in the air. Mm-hmm. So you just didn't have the weapon systems that were employed. It was flagpoles, it was bear spray, it was, it was people with baseball bats and other bludgeoning things, but it just wasn't that. Yeah. And it's an outlier. And I think they just went that doesn't fit our story. We're just not going to cover it.
Well, Kyle, let me ask you this question. Sorry, Jeff. I don't mean to keep jumping.
All right, go ahead.
But as it comes into my mind, I don't want to forget it. No. I have this, sort of a theory. I'm not sure. But by planting one device at the RNC and one device at the DNC, do you think that there was some strategy there where the mainstream media isn't going to want to cover this a lot because it may be a left-wing person, and the few right-leaning media groups may say the same thing because they're afraid now there was a bomb at the DNC and it could be a right-wing individual. So both sides were sort of silenced by the fear that it could be one of them, I guess.
I think it's a reasonable guess. I don't think that there's any error in that logic. As far the problem is we don't have anybody to query and find out, and we don't have a government that's making a case against somebody and saying this is the reason we think they did this, and here's the ideology that predicated this thought process, and this is why they went out and did it.
Because they appear to be conflicting motivations.
They do, except it's not really an RNC bomb. It's just relatively in proximity to the RNC. It was actually close to the Capitol Club, as I understand it. So there's it actually wasn't really an RNC and a DNC, but that's an easy handle. And I think that may be just as easy a reason for people to not grasp it. They're like, all right, well, that wasn't, is it even politically motivated? And again, I'm telling you, these are the secondary sites where the bombs were set. So who knows what the original plan looked like? And then who knows what the sort of like contingency that was worked out in the darkness as somebody panicked. And I do think this was a panic. I do think they did a poor job of it. It wasn't a great placement. This wasn't an op that you would have been proud of. And then at the end of the day, let's be real. I think the FBI, this is my, Jeff, you heard me this morning, but I think the FBI found them in a week, which is about how long I would expect someone to find. It would be, Boston Marathon bombers, 5 days. Charlie Kirk assassin, 3 days. That was a little bit fast. And also the fact that person even got away is crazy, but it's a small area in Utah that's not used to that kind of crime. Yeah. I think that you put a full court press of the FBI on somebody, 5 days, 7 days. We have some information we're going to run down. We're honing in with tighter and tighter guardrails. Look, I don't love the FBI. I've got a lot of hate for the FBI for the things that they did to my family. And generally speaking, I think that the political aspect of it is bad, but it's not an incompetent organization. And it's not staffed by people that are unable to do the work of law enforcement if people get out of their way.
Right. Now, and also the fact that, the location would be the worst possible location for something like this, because like you said, you commit a crime out in Utah and it's a barren sort of a part of the country. There's 600, well, there were 600 agents in the Washington field office when I was there. It's probably closer to 800 at this point. And I'm thinking that, that's the talk about not having to bring in the reserves. You have the manpower right in place, within a mile of these locations, so you can overwhelm the area with agents to get off the ground fast. It's not like we bringing people in.
We had just done that as well, because we had just gone through the 2020 Summer of Love, where there was all kinds of riotous and bizarre activities. So we had already activated all the local assets and resources. We had flexed ATF to come out and use whatever field office assets were there. DEA was on the ground on a regular basis. We brought Bureau of Prison riot squads in to be able to stop stuff over at the Capitol, which I was part of some of this stuff as well. So the number of flexes and bringing on all of your assets to bear on a problem was actually pretty FBI offices don't often set up a command post and handle a major event, but we had a major event for 6 months in a row, off and on. And so it was not foreign to us to be able to do that sort of thing at that time, being out of that office. So yeah, being able to flex to a bomb and then also an investigation of a riot on a single scene, I don't think it was going to tax them. And again, it's my belief. I believe what Steve Baker found is real. I think that it's legit. I can explain more of that too. But I also
let's get into that story and why you
covered it up. I think they covered it up.
Well, let's get into that story and why Kyle is in the middle of it. Steve Baker was actually one of the January 6th arrestees. He received a pardon from Trump. And he's the reporter, along with Joseph Hanman, who just came out with this story. And basically, the gist of it is they hired somebody to do a gait analysis, which apparently is a thing. I want to ask you guys: is it a thing? To analyze how somebody was walking, and based on that, they identified this woman, Shawnee Kirkhoff, as the suspect. And Kyle mentioned earlier that he was doing surveillance right next door, and he is quoted in this story. And the unusual thing is that after Kyle suggested they do a knock and schmooze or whatever it's called, they were pulled off, which is rather suspicious. So what's that all about? Let's show folks what it looked like there. That's where you were. When you say next door, you mean next door, like they shared a common wall, right? That's how close you were.
Yeah, I actually got those backwards. So the one on I had my numbers mixed up. So the surveillance team was actually looking at the door on the left. And yes, the alleged pipe bomber that Steve Baker's team found is on the right. I think it's irrelevant. They're 9 feet apart from the center of the doors. It's, 2 door widths. It's like if you were to open the doors both fully and put them back on themselves, you get a minor wall in between them. But yeah, they have a shared wall. They got a shared roof. These are what are called row houses in the Northern Virginia area, in the DC area, which is essentially like a condo. They've got a lower unit and then an upper unit. And so the upper units have a shared landing. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, we're looking at a door, and a few feet away, if I'd seen what was going on in one door, I'm going to see what's going on in the other door. And we were legitimately looking at somebody, person of interest 3, as I read the report again. We didn't delineate it that way. There's a person's name associated with it, but I'm not going to say his name. And honest to God, I don't think necessarily there was any incriminating evidence other than he lived right next door to the person. And the odds that the FBI got us that close, and the story why we got that close is really specific. And it's also kind of a slam dunk for surveillance. Having done that for as long as I did, I mean, I had 3 straight years of doing nothing but surveillance every single day. So 1,000+ days of doing this. I cannot remember a time when someone said, here's the deal. Here's who we're finding. This is an unknown subject. And we're going to put you out there because somebody dropped something in the city. And then they went and used the Metro card. And the Metro card that they went into in the DC station and exited in Falls Church were a Metro card that was bought by a person. And that person, that's person of interest 3, let's say, that person also owned a vehicle, and the vehicle owned by the person who purchased the Metro card picked up the person that came out of that Metro station.
And this would be the Air Force person?
Yeah, this is exactly. And so this is the address that you need to go to, and you're going to watch here and find out if this person and this person has a very different build and doesn't look anything like what the surveillance videos of the pipe bomber or the other person of interest that came out of the turnstiles looks like. So the question is how do they know each other, and why were they getting to that vehicle, and what's the story there? And I think we would have found it out in very short order from what I'm seeing and what was being, what was briefed. That's a slam dunk. We never get that close. I mean, I'll just tell you, Greg, we used to get case agents saying, we think they live in this neighborhood and we think his baby mama lives in one of these buildings over here. And she tends to drive like a whitish looking car. Good luck.
Yeah.
And we would find them like 85% of the time. We'd find them because we're pretty good at what we do. We have really good instincts. That's just what happens. If you're out there in the world, if you got there are certain tactics that you can do when you're doing surveillance to make yourself more likely to be lucky than not.
Kyle, I imagine if this person had been interviewed early on, as you suggested, and was shown the video, I mean, don't you think at that point that person would likely have said, assuming that they are not an accomplice, gee, this kind of reminds me of my next door neighbor.
Yeah. Or, oh, you know what? I lent my car out on that night and, somebody was driving it. And so, yeah, I mean, I just handed the keys to the gal who lives next door. She had to go pick up her boyfriend, or she said she had to do that. Like whatever story that was innocuous, you would find out.
Yes.
So my recommendation was, because 1, I was in the Air Force and I don't mind talking to people, as you guys can tell. And I was the kind of FBI agent that didn't mind doing a knock and talk, and I didn't need a lot of information. I'm going to go make a friend is what I would tell people. You go knock on the door, you go make a friend. And I'm also really honest with people. I'd be like, hey, I'm with the FBI. You don't have to talk to me, but if you'd like to, here's what I'm here. Would you like to talk to me? And people feel good about that. And they oftentimes, I had people more often than not tell me, you're really not what I expected when I met an FBI agent. And I go,
that's why I call it knock and schmooze. It sounds friendlier when
it's like sales. It really is. And whenever I would do these things, people would go, you're not the kind of FBI agent I expected. I go, yeah, they're a bunch of nerds, and then they would laugh. And it's like, yeah, we're just people. Let me read something to you, gentlemen, if it's okay with you. This comes from the report that was produced by Congressman Loudermilk and Tom Massey's office. This is the 4-year update. And this is exactly what we're talking about right here. This moment is what they got from the FBI. So they're summarizing the FBI's investigation of this exact moment that we're discussing. And you guys tell me if you can find where the cover up is. I think it's actually really worth doing. If you're okay with it, I'll do that.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So Jeff, here's it goes. Ready? The FBI initially identified multiple persons of interest. That's why I'm using these terms, because I don't remember those terms. Almost immediately, the FBI identified multiple persons of interest whose actions on or before January 6th raised questions for the case team. There's a footnote 300 email. We don't know what it is. In documents obtained by the subcommittee, the FBI identified a person of interest, POI2, who on the morning of January the 5th, approximately 9 hours before the suspect planted the explosive devices, security cameras captured photographing a dumpster next to the location where the RNC pipe bomb would later be planted. According to the FBI, after taking pictures of the dumpster, POI2 walked around the Capitol complex and met with two other unidentified subjects, returned to the same alleyway behind the RNC, then entered the Capitol South Metro station and rode the metro to Falls Church, Virginia. That picture you showed earlier was in Falls Church, Virginia. Notably, the agents assigned to the case team determined POI2 used an Uber account and a Metro smart card trip registered to a separate individual, POI3, the person I believe that we were surveilling, who lived in Falls Church, Virginia. According to the internal emails obtained by the subcommittee, the FBI's case team considered POI2's movements highly suspicious and considered POI2 as a possible accomplice to the pipe bomber. But they knew at that time even that it was unlikely to be the pipe bomber. Okay. In the weeks following January 6th, the FBI directed significant resources towards POI2 and POI3. For example, both the FBI placed both POI2 and POI3 under FISURE, also known as physical surveillance, by the Washington Field Office's WFO Special Operations Group, SOG. That was my squad. I only remember going after POI3. I don't remember POI2 at all. And so maybe they had case squads do that. The FBI obtained grand jury subpoenas for the phone data associated with POI2 and POI3's phone numbers and issued preservation requests for the following selectors. They don't tell us what the accounts are, but they're social media or phone numbers or email, something that they're redacted for PII, personal information. With help from United States Capitol Police, the FBI also tracked the movements of the two unidentified subjects that POI2 met with while walking around the Capitol complex on January the 5th. Here's where I think it gets really squirrely. On January 19th of 2021, FBI agents interviewed POI2 and ultimately eliminated that individual as a person of interest. According to a summary of the interview obtained by the subcommittee, the FBI learned that POI2 traveled to Washington, D.C. to attend First Amendment activities on Capitol Hill on January 5th. And throughout that day, POI2 photographed, quote, objects bearing numerals, end quote, including doors, dumpsters, and other objects, and intended to use these photographs in a book he was writing. I'm sure you guys have probably seen that book. Neither have I. Following the interview with POI2, the FBI ruled out POI2 and POI3 as possible persons of interest. Now, there's a weird thing here because I'm going to add this was not in the committee's report. The FISURE, the physical surveillance that my team did, was on January the 13th and January the 14th. I asked if we could do a knock and talk, which wouldn't be common for SOG to do, but I'm an uncommon guy. And this was an uncommon time. We had someone theoretically dropping pipe bombs in the capital region. So I made an offer that was, not normal, but if somebody was nervous about doing it, I was happy to go do it. They pulled us off on the 14th, but then they went and did an interview on the 19th. And I want Greg to consider something. When you have somebody who's a person of interest, would you rather us watch them indefinitely, thinking of FBI not worrying about resources? Should we watch them indefinitely until you go do the knock and talk and then see what they do afterwards? Or would you rather just let them out of pocket and see what happens for 5 days?
I don't know what would have changed that they would pull you, and unless they were certain that they were barking up the wrong tree.
I think it was something worse than that.
Well, when they pulled you, Kyle, did you ask for an explanation?
I asked my boss, but there was none pending. That's not really the way it worked. What they told us we needed to do was we all needed to go back to the offsite. So we didn't work in the field office and we didn't work in the resident agency, which is out of Manassas. We worked out of a different building that was offsite and sort of like hidden away. And we went back to our offsite and we sat at our computer terminals and we downloaded tips. I'll call them that. They weren't really tips, but whatever they were. They were the intake forms that people filled out at the FBI's website saying, I knew Greg back in the day and he seemed to really like Ronald Reagan and I think he's an a-hole. And so I think he was at January 6th and you should go get him. So we got a lot of those. Like we got over 500,000 of those, identifying people from around the country and saying that this person probably was there because I didn't like them and they're a jerk and they like Trump. So we got thousands and thousands and thousands of those. And we were told that the SAC and the special and the ADIC, this is the top of the field office, the executives that run the field office.
Would that have been D'Antonio at the time?
That was D'Antuono. And below him on my end of things was the intelligence division. That was Jennifer Moore, who ended up firing me for whatever reason. Just interesting kind of coincidence. Mm-hmm. They pushed it back to us and said that the metrics were all going into the yellow and going into the red, which means that they had too many tips that were unaddressed in a time limit they were supposed to do it. So there was a possibility that they were going to get kind of like an administrative ding, and they didn't want that. But the problem is that anybody anywhere in the United States could have addressed those leads and could have assessed them for whether or not they were active or real. They could have been farmed out to the places they came from.
Exactly.
And we actually have a unit that does this. It's called NTOC, the National Threat Operations Center. It's in West Virginia, and they're specifically employed to handle this stuff coming in. Now, they were overwhelmed. To their credit, they did the best they could. But they were meant to handle this, and you didn't need specialized surveillance guys who have fake IDs and have cameras and have video equipment and have experience and time and vehicles that are attributed to not the FBI and so on, and backstories that are used to going out and sitting and watching people. We didn't need to come in. There was only 6 or 8 of us, and we weren't going to make a bigger dent in the 500,000 leads that were there than the rest of the agents combined. You said 800. It's probably like 800 to 1,000 actual agents that were doing this stuff at Washington Field. So the specialty teams should do special stuff. That's why you're on the teams. Anyway, that was a totally illogical thing to do. And that was the first thing. My dad remembers me calling him and telling him that I got pulled off that case and that it was illogical when it happened. And he was like, I remember. And I went, oh, they're covering it up. That's my dad for you. My dad's never been in law enforcement, but like he saw it from the outside as being one of those moments where you just go like, oh.
Barry Loudermilk is on the phone. He says he wants to call your father to testify.
Outstanding. Yeah, done. Actually, I had somebody from his office trying to reach out to me today through like some really obscure means, and it's like I have a publicly available email address. You can just email me. It's on my Twitter.
Worked for us. So Barry Loudermilk is the Georgia congressman who's the chair of the committee looking into the January 6th Michigas right now. And in fact, the news is he's trying to get some information from Harris's Secret Service detail, and that seems to be something that could be revealing. But let me get back to an early.
I want to know if they saw something on that day, or what they did, or what their sweep looked like. If they were pulled off it, if they were told, "Hey, ignore this area. This is out of bounds." Like, those are simple things.
Right.
We've already I kind of identified what those questions would be, so the audience can guess what he's asking about, just so they know.
So Loudermilk is one of the good guys, right? You like him?
In my experience thus far, having known none of them and not liking any congressman in general, as a general rule, I just don't think any of these people are doing the stuff that I want them to do. He has been a stalwart supporter of getting information out to Steve Baker. It's almost always through like a chief of staff or some kind of staffer. But yes, Loudermilk has been on the team that makes sense to me. And also Tom Massey has been on that team as well.
Right.
I've seen him publish about it. You'll also see tweets very recently that he's published about the recent scenario, this one in particular. This is from yesterday at 3:23, or you guys are Eastern time, so 3:23 Eastern. And I'll just tell you that tweet was predicated by new information coming in that he just got and then requested permission to share. And I know that because the people who shared it with him gave him the opportunity to say, yes, like you can go forward and say that we have it. So this is that tweet was predicated by information that is not currently public.
All right. Well, you read from Loudermilk. Was that something that he wrote in the current investigation, or something else?
That was published. Let me tell you the name of this document here. It's on page 60 and 61 of a document that was called something to the effect of January 6th. Let me give you the name of the actual thing. People can find it. 4 years later, examining the state of the investigation of the RNC and DNC pipe bombs, produced by the interim staff of the Committee on House Administration, Subcommittee on Oversight, Chairman Loudermilk, and then also the subcommittee, which was put together by Tom Massey. So they're the two that are on that. Hence, I'm naming them. That was January 2nd of 2025, 4 years later.
Yeah, well, he's been on this for a while. Here's a sound clip, actually, if you want to hear what Loudermilk sounds like.
And so we're now reaching out to the FBI. They are being very cooperative, looking for all information they had. Why was the investigation dropped? Why didn't it go any further? And, looking at some specifics, like when were the pipe bombs actually placed? Were they live? And how, if there was a live pipe bomb that, according to the FBI, did have some black powder on it, especially the one over at the Democrat headquarters, how was a Secret Service agent able to walk past it 5 times without his bomb sniffing dog alerting on it? And then why were citizens, just allowed to walk within feet of the pipe bomb while it was supposedly still active?
He sounds like he knows what time it is.
Yeah, he's asking all those right questions. The fact of the matter is that due to the sort of very diligent timeline construction, the Blaze has put it out a number of times now when these things were placed, how they were placed, and have tracked this person all over God's green earth in Washington D.C. I don't know if DC constitutes God's green earth. It's kind of like a godless place in some ways. But they've tracked this thing down, and also the pre and the post. And so all of that kind of leads to the gate analysis, because there's an awful lot of walking that's involved in these videos. Yeah,
well, let's talk about the gate analysis. I mean, is it something that happens very much? I mean, is it a tool that's used? How reliable is it? To what extent should we believe it? That's how the woman was identified, right? That's
correct. People get drone striked for less conclusive matches than what they have here with this information. A gait analysis, and this is the funny thing. So Steve Bannon's like, what? They like looked at him walking and then made a determination? No, dear Steve, that's not how it works. So what they do is they have computers that can basically assess where your muscular skeletal structure interacts with your clothing, and they can outline your body using AI and other sort of, computer analysis. So they're matching movement through time and space that is very, very specific. There's only so much flexion that happens in every person's knee, and it's unique more or less to you based on your height, your weight, your physical history of whether or not you've been injured, whether or not one foot is bigger than the other, your one leg is slightly longer than another. We all have these little idiosyncrasies about our actual physical build that you may not even be aware of, but they exist and they can be measured. And so hip flexion and cadence, the variability of your cadence, the speed and the rate of your stride, the distance, and so on. They're very unique and they're very specific. Even with my imprecise monitors that I wear when I go for a run, I can tell you my stride length. I can tell you my cadence and the changes that happen in coordination with my heartbeat. I can tell you my left-right balance and the probability or the differential on one side or the other. The computers can measure this as well. It's ground contact time and so on. So the story goes is that it's incredibly precise. It also, if people want to go and look open source, because I encourage people to look on their own and just, make yourself familiar with it. If you're a law enforcement person who said nobody's ever used this in a trial, you're right. They don't use them in trials yet. It's not a common metric, but it is very useful overseas for our law enforcement, adjacent and our military operations that are going to try to ID people. Intel uses it very heavily. The stuff they use, they didn't pay a private contractor to do this. They went through one of our intel agencies and went to one of the contractors, as I understand it, that was like working on behalf of or has access to federal government beyond government technology. Greg,
well, who is it, though? You said as you understand it.
I can't tell you, but I do know. I just can't tell you.
Let me just ask you journalistically.
I'm not going to tell you.
You'd have to tell me if you told me. I know, but let me ask you a question journalistically. Like, what should the reader think when the person wasn't identified, even broadly speaking, and also the article didn't include the video footage itself that was analyzed?
That's right.
What would be the reason for that?
Well, first of all, it's a print publication, so I don't think that makes sense for them to put that out there as far as what they're going to do. But the analytical software,
it's an online publication.
It is, yes. But the analytical software, if you actually were to show the software, it would tell you who actually provided it, which would tell you who the source was. So the federal government is big on sources and methods. This is a thing we've heard millions of times. If you were going to see the source of the analytical process, you would also understand both the method and who the people were that were involved in it. And they're not actually able to say at this point. And I know that for a fact because I've been told who it is. And there's not just politics behind it, but there's also some OPSEC as far as the capabilities they're not trying to reveal. So it matched on that thing to the point where the Blaze legal team felt comfortable moving forward. And that should tell people something, because the Blaze is not Kyle Seraphin sitting in his podcast studio. The Blaze is a like hundreds of millions of dollar company that has a huge physical presence, and they have hundreds of employees, and I've been to their studio set, and they have professional everything, including lawyers who do analysis on this, and they felt comfortable moving forward under a couple of things. One, it wasn't just that the gate matched, because that's critical. You need to have that happen. A 94% match doesn't mean that 6% of the population also walks the same way. That's not what it means. It means that the variability between what they saw in the subject, the control, and the unknown subject, which they were analyzing, matched at a 94% rate. And so you can already click out all the people that don't meet the height requirements. The subject that they were looking for was about 5'7". So that's very specific. Now you have that. The second thing is that the subject they were looking at had a pronounced right leg drag, which is a specific feature similar to a limp that happens. And it turns out the subject they identified had a right leg surgery in 2015 due to a soccer injury that happened while she was at Temple.
Broken tibia.
Correct. And that changes your game. It changes the way things work. And they also noted that they also had significant amounts of historical footage pre and post surgery. They had athletic footage of her being a goalie or whatever it was she was on the soccer team at Temple. They also had her
smart audience. You're not the only one who has a smart audience.
Yeah, these people read, and that's the thing. That's why they put it out there for people. And people have done a lot of digging on this, and I encourage people to do that. Like, go find out. Not only that, but they also had tons of footage of her as a Capitol Police officer in uniform by name, walking in and out of buildings, so they could watch her from all kinds of angles and all the resolution that was, native footage. And then you have this unknown stuff, and they have dozens and dozens of cameras. There's like literally thousands of them, as I understand it. And so they went through and found the places where this person was captured moving. did the assessment, and they didn't go from the FBI's garbage, grainy stuff that you saw, which all had a reduced frame
yeah,
rate.
but you explain why they can't reveal the thing about who analyzed it and so forth. But what about the footage itself? Where did they get the footage? Where did that?
Well,
come?
that's what Loudermilk's committee has been doing, has been providing people. And so journalists have had the access, if they were so inclined, to go
That's
in
what
and
was
sign up.
analyzed. That's what was analyzed. Footage that Loudermilk. But why can't they show that?
They theoretically could. They don't necessarily own it. Some of that's actually out there. So you guys could find it and they could assess it themselves if you wanted to compare like the high res footage. It's actually out on Rumble for whatever it's worth. You could find a lot of it. And some of it is in Steve Baker's feed if you go through his X feed. But essentially what would happen, as I understand the process, having not done it myself, they go in with timestamps and specific cameras that they want to see. So they get permission. They book hours in this CCTV footage room. There's 4 terminals, and that's all there is. And so they get in there, they queue up camera 2255, they pull into 2255, they zoom to the, the day and the time that they want to see it, and they begin reviewing that footage. Then if they see something like, aha, we want this footage, then they put in a request that has to go and be approved by various people, to include Representative Matt Loudermilk, but maybe others as well. And I don't know who it goes through, but there's this process on whether or not they'll get it and when they'll get it. And the crazy thing is, occasionally they'll request it and then some other journalist will actually get it released to them, which has been a major frustration as they kind of hand out some of this stuff. The story of analyzing gate, as your listeners or your viewers are coming up with, it's not new technology. It was used in part to identify Osama bin Laden. It was much more primitive back then, 2009. So figure out what your cell phone looked like. But you had a 6-foot+ Arab walking around, a bunch of shorter people. So that makes it easier from a satellite. We're talking about CCT footage from buildings, and the technology is 16 years better. In 2017, the Defense Information Systems Agency, which is the biometrics agency that does all of the security for the Pentagon for all their sign-ins and whether or not you have the right Hirsch code and iris IDs and thumbprints and all that. The guys that do that for the Pentagon and do it for DOD, they were doing pilot programs of trying to figure out, can we do gait analysis on a phone? So as you walk around with it, the analytical capabilities would let people know that you were the person carrying your device. And so you didn't have to take off gloves or night vision goggles or gas masks to be able to do facial recognition. So they were looking at gait analysis. And I was told this, and I haven't been able to confirm it, but it's likely that it is actually the primary tool that they can use in very nasty conditions, high dust, low visibilities, that your unique gait is enough as long as you narrow the parameters that it's not going to be someone who couldn't be you. And so the reason why this analysis of this woman is so powerful, it's not that they matched it to all the cops that exist in the country and they came up with this lady. They came up with a lady who was physically at the Capitol on January 6th. So we know she was in the region. She physically had access to the places she went. Some of the things they did was actually track that the alleged pipe bomber rolled into office buildings that are patrolled and controlled by the United States Capitol Police. And so the people it could be would essentially be a friendly law enforcement with building access to the Fairchild building, I think it is, in the Longworth building. There are 2 buildings that are specific. They would also have to have familiarity. So you've got basically friendly law enforcement that's been there before, U.S. Capitol Police, who has access and can go in and out, or a staffer or a member of Congress. So your pool that you're actually analyzing is quite small, and they're all on camera going in and out of these buildings overtly. And then lastly, it's like, okay, does the rest of the situational information line up? And so it's not like you took it out of a pool of everybody in the Washington, D.C. area or all the cops in the world or whatever. This is a narrow suspect pool that they were already evaluating. The gait analysis is far more conclusive than any of what Steve Bannon was talking about. Not to impugn what he's saying, but he's very lax of days ago. And most people have never used this. It's also, imagine the first time someone said they were going to use touch DNA in a court case. And
he didn't have you. He didn't have you. I mean,
that's true.
Steve Bannon probably is not an expert in that, and neither is Julie Kelly.
That's correct.
By the way, we have one of our regulars here, Somerville John. No, hold on. That's the wrong one. Somerville John says he's a big Julie Kelly fan.
He can be.
Kyle is not.
I am not.
Kyle is not.
I'm not. And Julie Kelly is, she's a particularly nasty person to me personally. She sent me a lot of nasty, threatening stuff just because she didn't like what I did. Julie Kelly and I fell out, and Greg and I can laugh about this a little bit, but we fell out because, and by the way, I used to provide her information, which she knew nothing about the FBI, and I would imagine she still knows very little. We fell out because she made a claim essentially that the FBI was going to assassinate Donald Trump. She was going to assassinate him at Mar-a-Lago. The FBI was going to. because they included the deadly force policy in the FD 888 operations plan.
Okay.
And as you probably know, that was pre-printed post Ruby Ridge on every single ops plan. It's the only non-negotiable part of your operations plan. The FBI's deadly force policy is always in effect if you're an FBI agent. If people meet the deadly force policy, then you can use deadly force. Her claim is that by briefing that to people that were going into Mar-a-Lago for a search warrant, they were actually signing the death warrant of Donald Trump, despite the fact the FBI knew she wasn't there. He wasn't there. They planned their ops, so he was going to be up in New Jersey when it happened. And so when I pushed back and I said that's not the case, what I found out after the fact, and this is unsubstantiated, but it aligns with most likely what happened. It sounds like Jason Miller, who was part of Donald Trump's campaign to get him elected in November of 24, had this idea that they would basically demonize the FBI and say that they tried to kill Trump to basically get more and more MAGA people behind it. And so that people would be outraged and incensed and they would go and turn out and vote, which is not a bad idea. It's only bad if you think that there was a lot of danger happening right then. This is in early 2024. And if you went out there and got a bunch of people inflamed that the FBI was trying to kill Donald Trump, it was likely as not that they would actually go and attack the FBI's buildings or personnel, which would actually backfire on people who wanted Donald Trump to be elected tremendously. And so I wanted to temper people's understanding of it. And nuance was not a game she was willing to play with. Now, also, she's donated like over $143,000 to Democrats in federal elections between her and her husband. They've donated tens of thousands of dollars, her individually, like well over $10,000 in state elections, all to Democrats. They put a lot of money towards Democrats in the voting. And she donated to Joe Biden and then wrote a book about Donald Trump, and people who didn't like him were disloyal to him at the same time. So Julie Kelly's got some skeletons in her closet that she doesn't like to deal with. You think
Steve Bannon knows that? He must know that, right?
They all know it, and they've all blocked me because of it. I actually sent it over to her former boss, Sean Davis at the Federalist, and he said, if you're only going to run little ops on Julie Kelly, I'm like, it's open source. It's the Federal Election Commission's, hard donation monies. This is hard money donations. These are not through PACs where you have to guess where it goes.
So they just want to ignore it.
She gave money to Hillary Clinton for president. She gave money to Joe Biden for president. She gave money to Barack Obama for Senate and for president. So Julie Kelly theoretically should answer that. She will not. And she was never a food blogger either. She used to just do like Monsanto shill stuff. So a lot of her old stories, if people go find it, you can go to the Genetic Literacy Project, if you guys want to know about Julie Kelly, and read her stories about how Roundup won't make you sick. It's fine on your foods, and GMOs are great for you. Organic foods are a myth. That was her actual.
The takeaway on this is do not cross swords with Kyle.
I mean, I know how to look people up. I know how to do research.
You're very good at it.
Yeah, it's like I was an investigator. What do you think is going to happen? And I didn't even think to do any of that stuff, because if you're just a writer and you're out in the world and you're writing things, I'll take you at face value. You are who you say you are. But if you decide to come at me for some strange reason when I tell you something that is objectively true, and Greg, back me up on the 888. Tell me about the deadly force policy if you want.
Well, bear in mind, Kyle, I left service in 1990.
It's always in effect when you carry a gun. Doesn't matter.
No, I know that. I know that. And when I first heard the talk about how this policy was in place for the Mar-a-Lago raid, I was thinking, and every other operation that the FBI is involved in.
Every surveillance that I did, all 1,000 days we did surveillance, it was our policy to say it over the radio so that everybody's most recent touch with the deadly force policy was everybody heard it that morning. So if we got into a shooting during the day on our work, we would the first thing they ask you in the inspection division is what was the deadly force policy? When were you last briefed? It's like 6 hours ago. We all had a refresher, and everybody that I worked with could say it from memory, even though that's like an academy trick. I can still tell you the deadly force policy from memory because I did it 1,000 times in a row. It's just,
I was going to say, the repetition just drills it into your brain.
It's my personal deadly force policy too. Like I still carry a gun. I'm still like a regular guy who lives in Texas, and like I, defend my family if I need to. I know what the FBI's deadly force policy is because it's good enough for me to carry as an individual private citizen.
You live near Austin?
I do. Yep.
Do you not want to say the town? I mean, I'm not.
I live in a town called Liberty Hill, so we just live outside. It's just north of.
I have a good friend who lives. He's your neighbor.
Love it. There's good people out here. It's a good place. Yeah. Austin is a little bit crazy, but in Williamson County, where I live, it's relatively sane. And I could walk out of my front door and find cows in about 3 minutes on foot. It's not terrible, so that's a good thing. We're a little bit more rural than a lot of people, but I still live.
Yeah, I visited there. I know. Yeah.
That being said, the issues that Julie Kelly and I have notwithstanding, the information they had on that show with Bannon it's a little bit flippant. And you'll also notice if you guys watch the entire podcast that they never mention the information. They're kind of discrediting what Baker and Hanneman did. I diagnose it as jealousy. People can see what they want. But I also noticed that she never mentions that I was watching the door next to the person that Steve Baker identified, and he and I did not compare notes on what door to find. So he independently determined that the next door neighbor of the guy that the FBI found 1 week in was their person that they said did the thing. And my guess is, based on looking at Loudermilk's report, that the subject that Baker has identified as person of interest 1, likely the other person is someone very closely associated with person of interest 1. And I think it might be like a boyfriend or something. I may know more about that than I'm going to say right now, but that seems to be the guess. So we're kind of working through it. And then person of interest 3 was the person that I was looking at, who was the neighbor. And there's a lot more to this story than they did gate analysis and they guessed, and Seraphin happened to be nearby.
And you keep saying you know a lot more. You said on your show too. Is that because you've been talking to Steve Baker about it? Is that how you know?
Well, I talk to Steve Baker every day, and I've talked to him about 10 times a day because we're both like not sleeping and dealing with this. But additionally, I also know people that are now bringing information to this committee that are within the FBI and are also realizing that, the one thing I don't have access to anymore as a non-FBI agent is I don't have access to the files. And so my recollection is about 4.5, 5 years old, which is still pretty good. It turns out I was spot on all the things I said. But there's more to it than I recall, and things that are actually kind of like more conclusive when you know more things. And as I've been looking at this over the last couple of days with fresh eyes, having lived through it, and then, reevaluating what the actual documents might say, or being refreshed, people telling me, hey, what about this? And it's like, oh yeah, okay, got it. Now I can put that timeline together. I can associate who these people were. And I've also seen, Baker's work products over the last 5 years, which are not, they're not insignificant. People should check it out. I'll plug them over there. It's theblaze.com/truth. It's all in one place. They have their little sub headline there, and it's all January 6th stuff. Additionally, they found out that this woman that they identified as being the bomber, she was also involved in using less than lethal devices in what could be considered a lethal way, depending on how they actually landed on the crowd. And so she was out there potentially whipping up this crowd into a frenzy by doing pepper balls to the head, which does really change your perspective on things when you get smoked with a pepper ball in the head.
Yeah.
It is decidedly unpleasant.
Well, that becomes the lethal application of non-lethal force.
Exactly. And I gave the comparison this morning, but for people who are listening, you can take what is otherwise just, a less than lethal tool, and you can use it in a lethal manner. The great example is a baton. If I hit you in the hands, I change your mind. I hit you in the elbow, I'll change your mind. I hit you in the neck, I might really, really do some damage. I hit you in the head, I could turn your lights out forever. And so a baton is a generally less than lethal tool, which has lethal implications if used in such a way.
Right, well, let me play a video clip. Let me play a video clip of Steve Baker, so people, have a sense of who he is. As I mentioned earlier, he was one of the January 6th defendants who was pardoned, and this is Steve Baker reacting to the pardon.
They walked through and they waved a Trump flag, or they said USA, 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 or stop the steal even. None of which is a violation of free speech or constitutional rights. But in my case, I didn't do any of that. I walked through with a camera, a tripod, a man on the street microphone, and I just did the job of a journalist. But far more have had so much of their lives interrupted, destroyed, because of what they did that day. Just to walk inside an open door with 300 or 400 people in front of them walking through another open door. And they walked in and they took a photo and a selfie. I'm not one of those. Thank you, President Trump, for ending this nightmare for so many people. Thank you.
Seems like a decent guy.
He's a great guy. It's really hard watching a friend of yours in such an emotional state, because that obviously is a really powerful moment. Steve's a neat dude I'll just say it really clearly. I've done hours and hours of interviews with him on tape, and people want to find it on my program. They can if they want to go find out about Steve Baker. The last one we did, we covered some fun stuff. He actually used to be a subversive in the Soviet Union. He was a trumpet player by trade, and he actually went into the Soviet Union to smuggle in Christian information and Christian ministry stuff and help sort of the Christian resistance inside the Soviet Union. And he's been strip searched by the KGB. He's been called out by, the secret police services they had there. He worked basically under a sort of a fake cover. And my understanding is he may have been working on behalf of some American intelligence assets at that point too. And then had his own sort of side hustle as a part-time investigator. His dad was was a private eye for many years in Louisiana. And so he worked surveillance and did things like that and has an investigative mind and, actual in the field training for years and did journalistic kind of stuff for a while as kind of a hobby. And he played in a bunch of bands professionally. They had a Bowie impersonator band that he would do.
Oh, that's what I'm going to say. What kind of music?
Bowie. He's a trumpet player and he's fantastic.
Oh.
I'm sure he could play all of it. But he did a lot of sort of like big band stuff and sort of 70s things that were mixed. And, Baker's great.
And he lives in North Carolina, right?
He does. Yeah.
Yeah. So do I. So do I. Maybe you can introduce him to him. I'd love to have dinner with him.
Yeah. When he's there, he's at home only like 1 or 2 days a month, as I can always tell. He seems all over the place. He lives out of his car.
Get stopped by the Alexandria Police Department for driving through that neighborhood?
So that was his boss. That's the editor in chief at Blaze. Actually wanted to go see the house of the subject they identified.
Okay.
Drove by and actually, got pulled over by Alexandria PD or maybe somebody else in the neighborhood. But yeah, their house is obviously being looked at and apparently had a search warrant served there. Maybe it's real nebulous what the real story looks like. We're hearing complete silence from the FBI on this end, and I've got some suspicions about why. I think that this is going to be really embarrassing. So the other reason why I believe they got the right person is because everything scrambled in the IC, and that's the intelligence community. So the various different agencies that work underneath the intelligence agency have been going off like a hornet's nest, and all the source people that I talk to on a regular basis are buzzing and burning things up. And there's just anxiety in general because the implications of what this does is massive. If they're correct, and again, I believe that they probably are. I think that the odds of them being incorrect is not high. There's too much circumstantial along with forensic evidence that goes with it. If they're correct, the FBI covered this up because they're not that incompetent and they were on the actual people. They were following the person within a week and they cleared that person in 2 weeks of January 6th. That's completely illogical.
But Kyle, I got to ask the question that I think probably anybody who's listening, and I want to do it before we run out of time.
Yeah.
Do you have a theory as to what the purpose of this event or the motivation of this particular person could have been? Because I think we've established, the method or the means and the opportunity. Mm-hmm. But the big, the MOM, the missing M is the motivation, and that's what I'm struggling with.
Well, the belief is that this gal was not just in the dignitary protection unit and did like training for. She was in the Capitol Police 4 years. She was a hard charger. She's a high level athlete. She was a D1 athlete, and
highly intelligent, right?
Yeah, very intelligent, highly capable in this space. Not only was interested in being part of the training unit that helped people do less than lethal munitions and some of the physical stuff, but also was in the dignitary protection space, and apparently may have been moonlighting also underneath another division that happens inside the Capitol Police that was run by a person that people will be familiar with, whose name was Yogananda Pittman. And so, if she was in fact working there, and I think they're tying that up, but the odds are probable. Then you have someone who has been implicated from the beginning, who basically set the Capitol Police up for failure. If you talk to people like Chief Sund, he believes that the resource lack on that day was intentional and specific on purpose. And then you get a real problem. You've got a light-staffed Capitol. You have something that is going to immediately draw people away. I don't think this girl likely acted alone. I could be wrong. I mean, maybe she just got it up got it in her head that this is the right way to execute a coup on the American people, and I'm going to go and make these people look awful. But I think that actually probably comes from somewhere else. I don't think this is a sua sponte type.
If that was operation. The case, I don't think you'd see a cover up, right?
Right. So who do we know? The U.S. Capitol Police, they have a couple of problems. I've been calling them Praetorian Guard. They're very similar to the Praetorian Guard in a lot of ways. I think constitutionally they probably shouldn't exist because they operate an executive function under the legislative branch. And that doesn't make any sense to me. It's a separation of powers issue. So I've never heard anyone else make that argument, but I don't think I'm the original thinker of that. I just came to it on my own. And others must look at it and go, wait, how do they do policing actions and intelligence investigations and so on, and then also take action on them while they work for the legislative branch? It's not immediately apparent to me. They do answer to the sergeant at arms. The sergeants of arms answer to the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader. So those are your people that are the bosses. So they answer to a legislative function and they do an executive work. That's a real problem. And the other thing is just like any other protective detail, they know the secrets. They know who does what. And so there's a back scratching thing. Baker's told me that when they've gone through the OPR files, the Office of Professional Responsibility, which is Internal Affairs, that there are missing files, and they are the missing files of the people that were being investigated from the Dignitary Protection Squad. So they have special protection, including when they commit felonies. If they do dangerous things on duty or they leave a weapon, they seem to just get by okay. And so there's an interesting sort of familiarity between the members in the legislative part of it and then the actual sort of Capitol Police officers. So broad spectrum, what do I think likely happened? Kyle's speculation, 100%. Don't sue me over this. The likelihood is I think that a member of Congress or members of Congress basically coordinated this, or staffers, could be like something from the congressional end, came up with a plan that would say we're going to divert resources and we're also going to make the MAGA people look really bad by placing bombs outside of the Congressional Black Caucus, because we're going to run they're all racist, they're white supremacists, which, by the way, did make it into the press, even if there was no proof of it or make any sense. So I think you do that. You prove it. How do you know they're racist? Well, because they put pipe bombs outside the Congressional Black Caucus and they put it outside the DNC. And so this is the big problem. And so there you have this big, terroristic event.
Yep.
And you ask somebody trustworthy to do it. And then I think that this gal did it poorly. If that's what goes on, if she's the one who did it, the op execution was not great and was recognizable. And the gate was recognizable. And they probably realized that when the FBI was onto them in a couple of days. And then she took a transfer to the CIA less than 6 months after January 6th to basically a lateral position. She works in what's basically like force protection there, where she's campus security and potentially has, TDY occasional duties on the director's detail. So the thing that's most interesting to me about that is I spoke to a retired FBI agent yesterday who will remain nameless. And he said, that people don't get promoted to the CIA. We put them there when we need to hide them. And that's because the CIA has the capabilities and the function and actually the need when they have jobs that are legitimately covert. The FBI doesn't have covert jobs. We have undercover people, but they're not doing, they're in true name when they work for the Bureau. The CIA has people that do not work in true name on a regular basis. And so they can scrub social media. This woman does not have her name appear on the title of her house, as I understand it. The deed does not show it. She's not in the tax records. And the guys told me that they went to go do Google Maps and find her house on Google Maps. And when you do the point of view from the street, it's blurred out. So the CIA has significant resources to make people not visible, as you would expect for an intelligence.
Well, I think that one can. I think one can choose to blur one's own address, if I'm not mistaken.
Potentially, but you have to go through.
That's only one part of the piece here.
There's a huge suite of tools that you can execute, and they only hide people's addresses from the tax records in Virginia if you're law enforcement or you have a government need to do it. So you generally have to have that need.
I didn't mean to diminish the rest of your list, Kyle. I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, I think there are things you could do
for a low-level position like that to get that type of treatment. I mean, I would think that'd be reserved for the higher, for management or operators, but not, not your run-of-the-mill. I don't want to diminish the position, but
it's an overt position, though. Like your name is on your tag and you're working at the gate in a uniform. It's a uniform job. It's not like you can't say where you work.
Correct.
And so there are overt jobs and there are covert jobs. And she has what would generally be considered an overt job, where you can tell people what it is that you do and how you earn your living and where you go to work every day. And it's not a big deal.
Correct.
So for that to be the sort of full court press. And here's another thing, Greg, riddle me this. Somehow she went from Capitol Police to the CIA and she managed to get there. I think there's a polygraph, because my buddies who wanted to go from FBI to CIA to do something with them would have to take an additional CIA polygraph, and they mean it when they do it. And she would have had to overcome the question that I recall from my FBI polygraph, which was, have you ever committed a crime and gotten away with it? And that's a difficult thing to get away. And people can fake a polygraph.
Now, let me ask you this, though. Could she have taken that polygraph prior to this incident and still... I mean, if she was in the process of applying for that position,
anything's possible.
Okay.
Yeah,
'cause
I think let's rule that as a possibility.
Well, another possibility is she doesn't believe she committed a crime, right? Wouldn't
Also
that,
true. Yeah, on order. So therefore,
yeah,
didn't.
that'd be a tough one to.
It'd be tough to square with the wanted posters with your hoodie on it that you're walking around in your special
But
shoes.
I mean, I think the more, I mean, the conclusion that I drew was like, there's a distinct possibility that in the process, she got the polygraph out of the way in advance of this.
Possible.
That is possible.
Yeah. So
Right.
those are the two possibilities. The possibility is she already had this job lined up and she decided to go there. That doesn't seem to be something that we've heard as these guys were running it down. Remember, they're working with people who have access to these personnel files. That's why they knew where she
theory
worked.
that I had in my mind.
So it's a good.
It's get around the polygraph.
It's a great question. It's a great, route. This is why people who think about problems look at it and go, okay, well, here's some other things, and people should consider it. Like, be a skeptic. You don't have to take everything Kyle Seraphin says. I encourage you not to.
Right.
Evaluate
Well,
it against what you know.
you said facetiously that you don't want to be sued for sharing this theory.
I don't. Yeah, I don't.
But you, in fact, are being sued, and we want to respect your time. But before we say goodnight, can we talk a little bit about your lawsuit?
Sure.
Okay. Why don't we start with the sort of I don't know if you would call this the positive spin on it, but you're trying to get it dismissed, the optimistic spin on it. You accused Kash, I don't know about accused, but you sort of made reference to the possibility that Kash Patel's girlfriend might be a Mossad agent and it's a honeypot situation, because maybe it's not all that realistic to expect somebody who looks like Kash Patel to get a babe like that. All right, that's my crazy way of summarizing it.
I encourage people to read. The motion to dismiss is available. People can find it on Court Listener. I think they should read it. It's 20 pages. It's not a difficult read, but I think it's also a useful read. There was a complaint that was made, essentially, that I made two statements that were defamatory, and I think that even by listening to the podcast in its entirety, that people will not come away with the belief that I was making that accusation, because I wasn't, because I was saying it in a very sarcastic tone. And you can tell that I'm kind of flippant with my humor when I do things. And so people can listen to the words. I defined the term honeypot prior to saying it, which I say is it's an attractive woman. That's what we use it for. We used to have an ongoing joke when I worked counterintelligence. We had a gal that was very attractive. She's like 27 years old. She's former Army, and she was an agent sitting next to me. And she was, anyway, she was attractive. She was an attractive lady. And so we would have this joke, and she would say, do you think I could go and pull a honeypot off on this guy? And it's like, yeah, you could. And then my buddy Brian would ask, could I go do it? I go, no, dude, you're ugly. And he was like, I couldn't pull the honey dick off. And I go, no, you can't. So we would have this ongoing joke. It's a thing about your level of attractiveness. And so even if you go look up the definition of the word, it doesn't mean that you're out there doing something nefarious to be a honeypot. That's not the way the tactic is used. It's that you put somebody that's attractive that men might be inclined to try to get their attention by talking to them. And so you don't have to go do anything, nefarious or otherwise. And so anyway, the term, I think honeypot in general, and I actually will stand by this very clearly, I think it's not only not defamatory, I think it's complimentary, and it was used complimentary. It's kind of and the whole thing was tongue in cheek. The episode was entitled.
Well, you're not a lawyer, but Viva Fry is, and you got some love from him today. He tweeted out that it's not really defamation, and there it is.
I don't think it is. And I like I said, my attorneys jumped on. They're very good lawyers. They're very serious about what they do. They thought it was an important thing to stand on. And even the additional suits that have come out are even worse. And I think maybe even dumber than what they've done with mine. And mine was an utterly unserious suit. When I read it, I had lawyers tell me that it looked like somebody was drinking a glass of white wine with their girlfriend and sad. And then they put together the thing, because the complaint just makes all these conclusions from statements without any evidence that that's what they actually meant. They just define what things work. So they sort of defined a problem. So that's what it is. But people can read the statement that the attorneys have made. They can read the response to it. There's not a ton that I should probably say, only because we're in the middle of this litigation. I'm not trying to be inartful about it, but at the end of the day, the episode, if people want to go hear what it was, because they can go listen to it themselves. It was a podcast that I did that was entitled "Desperate FBI Director Digs Deep into John Bolton's Mustache." So you tell me if I have a sense of humor about things when I say it. I literally named the episode in kind of a humorous and snarky and sarcastic way, because that's just how I do things. And I'm hopeful the judge will see the same thing. I don't think that we should be sued for one instance of saying one thing one way or another if people's feelings are hurt. My problem also evolves from the fact that the law firm that is suing me, that she has worked with, is the Banal Law Group. And the Banal Law Group is one and the same as the Fight with Cash Foundation in and of they share the same physical presence. So Kash Patel raised money on whistleblowers and supporting whistleblowers, including guys like me. They raised $1.3 million the year that I went public with my story, and they gave me a couple of bucks. They gave me $10,000 and they raised $1.3 million, whatever it's worth. And that same law firm also runs the Cash Patel Legal Offense Fund, and they're now representing the FBI director's girlfriend. And the Fight with Cash Foundation is now called the Cash Foundation, and it's run by the president of the law firm that's suing me. And so all of that stuff is very, I don't know what it is. I mean, it's just,
and there's probably no way they'll invite you to their Christmas party this year.
Okay, so thank you for bringing that up. They invited
Is that
me
a good
to their
setup or not? Do I get an A+ for that?
They invited me to the Christmas party this year.
Yeah.
They did. I got an invite 2 days ago, so I don't know if I'm going to go or not. It might be awkward, but maybe I'll go and just see what they're doing. I've been invited to their Christmas party the last 4 years. And last year, I helped them coordinate a $50,000 donation to the Officer Down Memorial page, which memorializes cops who've been killed in the line of duty. Cash asked me, what's a good officer charity? I said, this is the one. I know the people who founded it. They're solid people. So they donated.
I think you should go with a hidden camera.
That seems like my MO at this point. Yeah. Or maybe I go with, hold on. I got this back here. I could roll with this one, like I could just do
I'd never noticed that. That is
very subtle.
Nobody would know. I got the press decals so people know who they're talking to, right? I got that.
Well, I can't imagine why anybody would see the humor or wouldn't see the humor in this woman being attracted to that man. But
this is the funniest thing about it too, because anybody who has any degree of confidence and look, how many of us have said, I married higher than my station, or I punched above my weight when I got married. Smart men say this all the time. This is a classic thing you say. Like, yeah, obviously I can't pull that, but God bless me, and here I am with this gorgeous person or this lovely person that's made my life better. Normal men say that all the time. They also don't tell their girlfriend to file a lawsuit. But he's 40 something years old and he's not married and never been married. So maybe that's a sore spot for them that they're looking at it, that 20-year age gap is something people are asking questions about. And are we really in a country where you can't ask that question? I mean, a guy got sued. Elijah Schaffer just got sued for posting a picture, the one you just showed, in the context of like an article that someone wrote about how Iranian, what was it? Mossad agents managed to go and recruit Iranian women to get information from Iranian men in Iran. And so like, he just posted it up there, no context specific. It was a retweet. If we're going to get sued for retweets in this country because you posted a photograph in the context of a news story, that's not the First Amendment. I mean, it's not even close to defamation. And then,
to paraphrase Elon Musk, I think humor is legal again or something like that.
You'd hope, but apparently it's not. Sarcasm.
Well, you can't stop people from filing a lawsuit.
You can't.
Greg, do I speak for both of the co-hosts of Probable Cause that if Kyle has any kind of legal defense fund and needs donations, we will help generate some funds for that? As ridiculous as this is, it would probably cost you money, and it shouldn't cost you money.
It's cost me about 2 and change months of what I've made. I do a podcast for a living. So yeah, at this point it's at least 2 months of advertising revenue, which is not, it's my sole revenue. That's all I do. It's what I do for a living. So yeah, it's not
you're
awesome.
Talking about legal fees so far. That's what you're referring to?
Yeah. There's nothing fun about having to pay 2 of the 10 months earnings you make in a year to attorneys over something that's frivolous. And by the way, no contact, no cease and desist. No, hey, you know what? That's really hurting our feelings. Yeah. Would you consider pulling that down? Would you restate that? Or, we think that you said something that was an error. I would have listened to it again and go, yeah, sure. Like, if you want, I'll restate it. You don't like my joke. At the same time, do we really live in a country where we're going to have our jokes policed or like our sarcasm policed? Because it wasn't really a joke. It was a sort of mean-spirited, sarcastic thing because this guy, he screwed over all my friends. I don't know if you guys know this, but like he screwed over my friends and he's still doing it. My buddies have not gotten the back pay that they were promised out loud. They haven't gotten, like, they're owed over $1 million between the two of them. And that hasn't been paid by the FBI. Years and years of back pay. He's paying Garrett O'Boyle, my friend, at the wrong pay rate. And I'm sure that's intentional. The way the FBI pay scale works, you go from a GS 12-1 to a 12-2 to a 13-1. That's just the scale. Garrett is the only 12-4 in the FBI that's an FBI agent, because if you're a 12-3, you suck, and they are not going to promote you to 13, and then they don't keep you around. They send you home, and you're no longer a bureau agent. So he's the only one that's like that, and they're doing that. And Steve Fred hasn't been rehired back. They're randomly paying him small amounts of money, and these guys are still waiting for health insurance. And this was all announced in what, like August?
Yeah, I
So
talked to Steve recently, and it was confusing as to his situation. Yeah.
yeah, he doesn't know either. I mean, he's been interviewed about who are his friends and whether or not they're going to rehire him, even though he has a signed agreement from the Deputy Attorney General of the United States of America saying that you've been reinstated and you're going to get your old job back plus your pay rate and back pay. So we've got people that are out. I mean, I'm a little pissed at this guy. I think that's fair, and I think I'm going to do it. And if I have a mean-spirited, sarcastic joke from here and then, which, believe me, I try to do better. Like, I should do better, and I want to do better. I don't always do better, but I've been under pressure for a couple of years here. This is pretty wild stuff to be, and I didn't sign up for any of this. Like, I signed up to be an FBI agent. I thought I was going to retire. Right. So Greg knows the story, how that goes. You have a plan.
We're making jokes, but I actually think it's a very important thing to be able to make this distinction between being offensive and then saying something that's actually punishable. You should, even if it's, as a matter of personal preference, that you can say, oh, good manners are important and so forth.
Sure.
But come on, you shouldn't face punishment for it. Like,
Jeff, I have people accuse me of being a Fed op and working on behalf of feds or working on behalf of Israel or working on behalf of you. Take it. Like, I've apparently worked for everybody. I'm a libtard. I'm voting for Harris. Like, you name it, I'm that. Everybody has said it in every way, shape, or form. And it's like, well, this is the internet. It's like, welcome to people.
Yeah, you don't sue them for it. You don't sue them for it.
I just move on with my life. I just found out my brother was on Twitter today for the first time. I haven't spoken to him in 9 years. He's been completely avoiding me. The pothead. And I swear, the thing he had to say was not very nice. I sent it to my mother, and she was very upset about it. She said, I'm going to call him and yell at it. It's like, don't. But it's the internet. I'll just block him. I don't care. Like, go away. Like, I thought we could be grown-ups and just say, people sometimes hurt my feelings a little bit, and then I get over it. But maybe that's because I was raised in the 80s, and she was born in 1998 when I was graduating high school. So maybe that's the difference, is that I was already almost a grown-up by the time she was born. Different era.
All right. Well, we covered a lot of ground. You were a great guest. You can, folks watching can check out the podcast, KyleSharapinshow.com. You're on 5 days a week. Is that correct?
I am indeed. Yeah. 9:30 in the mornings if they want it. Otherwise, Kyle Seraphin Show will take them to Spotify. It's a good viewing experience and audio, so that's easy to do.
And I heard you say that you are a one-man operation, right?
Oh, yeah. I am actually. In fact, I don't know if I can show you right now, but you may be able to see this if I can change
You're
cameras.
A professional. You'll be able to do it.
Well, the question is whether the thing will allow me to do it, and I believe it will.
Well, if you do it as a share screen, we can do it. There you go.
There's the op right there, folks. This is the Kyle Seraphin Show in its entirety right there.
Wow.
You're a pro. Well, it's not only the mechanical aspect of it that's impressive. It's that you have to spend some time doing research, and then you have to talk and be interesting all by yourself. I'm an idiot, so I can just, when I get stuck, I just turn it over to Greg, and he bails me out. You have to carry the weight all by yourself. I'm serious. That's a very difficult thing to do.
And I create all the visual too. So we created a visual that's grown over the years, and I've been doing it about 3 years now. So since I've learned what I'm doing behind this mechanism and this sort of this little cockpit that I fly every morning. I build out the visual graphics. I build out the video clips I want to do. I adjust the sound. I regulate all the metering and everything like that. And then, of course, I got to pull clips and pull articles I want to do. And I got to figure out what the heck I'm going to talk about for an hour to 90 minutes every day.
And you do it in the morning before each show, or did you do it the night before, or a little bit of both? I do it
in the morning. I start at 5:45. I roll out of bed, and it's like step one is like, what's going on today? People go, what's the show about tomorrow? I was like, dude, I don't know. Like, it's not tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's whatever I wake up with and the Holy Spirit blesses me with, and whatever the news cycle looks like at the same time. I feel like there's almost always a thread that I see that makes sense to me and that's interesting to me. And maybe it's interesting to other people. Turns out it is. So, it's a blessing to have a thing that you can do at home and go see your 2-year-old right afterwards and get big hugs. So it's definitely worse. It's definitely weird compared to my old job, because I actually got deposed by James O'Keefe, and his lawyers are like, you said James doesn't have a real job. And I'm like, no, he doesn't. And they're like, do you do a real job? And I'm like, no, it's not a real job. Like, dude, there's a fake wall behind me. I built a fake wall for people. It's not a real job. This is the craziest world that anybody could live in. I make a living talking to people about things that I think are important and other people care. The craziest thing about all of it, if nothing else, is that we've just by talking about news, I think I've had probably more than a dozen families tell me they've converted to Christianity because of it. So, like, we're doing some unexpected things with a podcast that basically talks about news and corruption, and people are drawn to faith, which That's pretty awesome. Like,
That's
I'll do that all
great.
day.
That's great. Good deeds.
It's a very strange world that I have woken up in. And if you had told me that when I was sitting on the pipe bomber case when I didn't think I was going to leave the FBI, they'd be like, "Hey man, 5 years from here, you're going to be sitting behind a desk and you're going to be talking to a microphone and a blank screen or a screen in front of you.
Right.
You're going to have people listen
guess
to
is you probably always were articulate, but I guess you had no sense of knowing how you could apply that skill, right?
I had no interest in doing it. I mean, my dad was in radio for 30 years. If I wanted to go into broadcast media, I would have done it. And I just didn't have that instinct. I had a brother, the one who doesn't talk to me anymore. He ran a radio show when we were in college, and he'd go and do, like he was, kind of a DJ in the college radio station. Right. Never interesting to me. Not interested in being on the mic or the camera or anything else. I wanted to shoot guns and run down bad people and put handcuffs on people.
But did you have the self-awareness of how articulate you are? I mean, I don't know that it comes up that much in the line of work you were in, but
I guess I've always felt okay. Like people do public speaking and they wonder, public speaking never bothered me because I have thoughts and I can say what they are and I can communicate my thoughts in word or in deed, in writing. And so I don't know. It never really occurred to me. I never wanted to explore it. What I used to do though, this is something kind of fun. I used to drive into my surveillance shifts at god awful hours in the morning, driving in through DC and just have like all kinds of frustrations. And, I'd drive into Baltimore and I'd want to do a rant. And so I would get on my friend group chats and I would record like a 3 to 5 or 8 minute long, like just, vitriol filled rant to my buddies. It was like the status of the day, and it was before they even got out of bed, kind of thing. So they'd wake up in the morning, and the guys would all be laughing, and they'd be like, "You should be doing this you should be just like posting this as a podcast." It's like Scarfin's 8-minute morning brief or whatever it is, just nothing but hatred to get your blood pressure going in the morning. So
there you go. That was it. That's what made it happen.
Yeah, it was a joke that we would talk about doing that. I never thought about doing it for a living, but it worked out. And so here I'm doing it. We'll see how long it lasts.
All right. Well, we told folks how to find the podcast. And if they want to see Kyle express himself in the written word, they can follow him at Kyle Seraphin.
Yeah. User beware.
All right. All right. Well, thanks a lot again. Happy Veterans Day. Thank you, Greg. Thanks to our beloved audience. Ask the Inspector will not be on tomorrow night because Scott Ritter is in Russia. But on Thursday night, the Winers will be on at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Our guest will be Sean Hibler. He is the director of a documentary that is just debuting on Amazon Prime called Climate Trails. It's about the chemtrail theories. And I won't give away right now whether I believe in that or not believe in it, but we're going to get into both sides. Are you guys familiar with the chemtrail thing? Yeah. You're not, Greg? All right.
No.
Well, tune in Thursday and you can hear both sides of it. This guy who did the documentary, he's one of the ones who believes that. Those it's actually Tucker Carlson's latest episode. He calls them stripes in the sky. Have you not noticed, Greg, that on some days what comes out of the plains leaves these very long trails. And
for many years. And I was always led to believe it was due to unique atmospheric conditions that created that environment. But maybe I'm wrong. I'll try to check out.
I'm not going to give away anything. That is one side. That is one side of it. All right. So that's Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. Again, thanks a lot. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, you bet, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.